So the house placements indicate whether something goes smoothly or if there's a lot of hardship and struggle involved. And so what we can do, we can take the most important factors in a Varga and see in what houses they are. And then we can conclude whether a Varga is easy or difficult for a person. And we can also call this the theme of a Varga. Now, to understand the theme of a Varga, we analyze the house placements of three key factors: the Lagna Lord, the important house cusp lord, and the Karaka. So the Lagna Lord in a Varga reveals how a person relates to that area of life, right? Whenever they involve themselves with that Varga, how do they experience it? Do they feel very lucky and happy about it, or are they super stressed whenever they have to deal with that certain area of life? The house cusp lord highlights the concrete conditions and events of a Varga, and so this lets us know if the concrete manifestations of a Varga is something that the person can look forward to, or is that Varga concretely just not good. And finally, the Karaka of a Varga contributes to the overall outcome of the Varga. Right? The Karaka rules the Varga and, of course, has a big impact as well. And so together, these three factors show whether a Varga unfolds with ease or with difficulty and hardship. So let's have a look at our example chart and figure out the themes of the Varga. In the D1, we can see that she's a Leo Lagna, and the Lagna Lord's Sun is here in the 12th house, a Dushtana house. The Karaka of the D1 is also the Sun, so there's a double theme of the 12th house, which is that of loss and expense. And since in the D1 the Lagna Lord and the house cusp lord are the same, we can use the Atma Karaka, which in her case is Mercury, because Mercury here is the planet with the highest degree. And Mercury is also in the 12th house, so this person has a 12th house theme of her main life path on all three counts. So right away we know that her life is difficult, right? The 12th house is associated with loss and expenses. The 12th house is the 12th from the first house, which is the self, the body, your career and calling and your potential. And so everything will cost her more money, more time, and more energy, right? And life in general will just feel draining and like a big sacrifice. And the first house has to do with one's career, one's capability, one's talent, and so she had to spend a fortune on studying in a foreign country for 3 years, while some of her friends couldn't afford it and just got regular university education at home in their home country. She left for 3 years to study abroad. And again, the 12th house particularly deals with foreign education, and so it's not surprising that she got educated in a foreign country. If she had only one factor in the 12th house and two other factors in better houses, then the education wouldn't have costed that much, right? And she wouldn't have perceived it as such a financial expense and burden. But as it was, her studies cost a lot of money. The first house in the D1 also rules the body and our physical constitution, right? It indicates how much strength and vitality our body has. The Sun is the Karaka of the D1 and also plays an important role as our immune system and skeletal system. And so right away, we know that this person's body is just not very strong, right? Both the Lagna Lord and the Karaka Sun are in the 12th house, indicating loss of vitality. And so she has been suffering from chronic diseases since her childhood. At this point in time, in her late 30s, she needs to go to the hospital almost once a month. Those are typically not life-threatening diseases. In fact, here with the sign of cancer involved, they're all based on a weak emotional foundation, right? Whenever she feels, overburdened by her work and her work environment, she starts to feel really horrible about her life. Then the symptoms come up and her body shuts down and she gets rushed to the hospital. And so being sick has been an integral part of her life, and this really comes from a lack of vitality and immunity here. So anytime a 12th house theme becomes prominent in a Varga, there will be loss in expenses, right? Loss of vital energy, financial expenses, right? A person just needs to pay more than others to get what they want. Sometimes it can also just mean the complete sort of loss of a life path, right? A person basically just does something completely different because their life path has just ended, and now they're starting a new one. And so the person really needs to surrender to situations that just change their life and that are really, really out of control. So surrender is really a big word for the 12th house. When something is over, then there's not much you can do then to surrender to that new reality and start anew, right? And then what happens when life perpetually just doesn't go the way we want, that things end and we cannot do anything about it? Well, there's usually the tendency to withdraw and start to think about the deeper meanings of life, right? There can be a feeling that, well, I can't control the outcome of my life, and so what use is there if things anyway just end against my desires? Or then I might as well just withdraw and focus on some more meaningful things. And so there's a tendency with the 12th house that a person might just live a more isolated life, a contemplative life. The 12th house, therefore, can be quite detrimental, actually, for living a full life, because the person just starts to feel disconnected from life around them, right? They have tried to move forward in their life, but then again, the big word for the 12th house is surrender to circumstances that are not under their control. And so then they feel like, well, I might as well just retreat and just be by myself, right? And so they can become quite detached and have less social interactions, right? So the 12th house really makes a person have less control over their life. They just, it's the 12th from the first house of life path, right? So it really feels like that they almost stand like next to themselves. They can never really fully be themselves. They're never fully in control of themselves. They feel lost in who they are, who they want to be. And so as a result, everything in life just becomes a lot more exhausting. It becomes more expensive as well and less rewarding and fulfilling. So now let's move on to the D2 and analyze the theme. We are going to look at the three key factors of the Lagna Lord, the House Cusp Lord, and the Karaka. So the Lagna Lord Sun is in the 12th house. The second Cusp Lord Mercury is also in the second house, and so is the Karaka Moon. So all three key factors are again in the 12th house, or the Dushtana house. And the D2 has to do with our financial responsibilities. And so the Dushtana theme makes this area of her life exhausting and unfulfilling, right? If there was only one of the key factors in the 12th house, then the influence on financial matters would only be like 1/3. But as it is, everything she does that has to do with finances suffers from extra expenses and losses. In her business, she's in charge of hiring people, and almost every single one of her employees takes advantage of her generosity and how much she pays. They all pretend they're really good at their job. Then she pays them up front, and after just a few weeks, or many times just a few days, it's pretty clear that they lied at a job interview. They're doing a very bad job, and then she has to fire them again. And so much money just gets wasted on constantly having to hire new people. And then what happens is, when those people leave, it takes time to find new ones. And in the meantime, she has to do the work all by herself. And so it's not uncommon that she literally only gets like 2 to 3 hours a night sleep for many days in a row. And in the meantime, of course, she has to constantly watch her back as, her employees just perform really bad at their job and sometimes even scheme purposely, to take over her business. And the 12th house has to do with, secret enemies and those plotting behind the scenes, to take you down. And so it's like on a monthly basis, that people come in who are either trying to harm her business or even sometimes trying to take over her business. There were instances when people come and they pretend they're going to work for her, and then actually what they do is they're trying to steal some of her better employees. So it is really a huge mess. And so the 12th house theme in the D2 here causes all these unexpected financial losses, all these secretive behaviors, all these setbacks in her business. Now this also all happens here in Cancer, which ties all those external events to her inner world, right? Many times when the stress becomes too much, then the body eventually gets completely exhausted, and all that she can do is literally collapse and go to the hospital and lie down for a day or two. But then as soon as she's back on her feet, she plugs right back in to this same level of surrender to this intensely volatile work environment.